Alright guys, Murph's here, and today we're going to talk about this. A Remington 700 ADL chambered in 270 Winchester. Now in order to talk about this, we are going to talk about a little bit of history. In the 1960s, Remington looked to revamp their product line, and they looked to take a major dig at the kind of leading rifle competitor, which would be the Winchester Model 70. Now, how they decided to go about this was to build a quality rifle that would take advantage of more modern materials as well as refined production techniques in order to be able to undersell or undercut the price of the Winchester Model 70. Keep in mind, the Winchester Model 70 is kind of old world machining and design at its best. So we have like a controlled feed bolt that has like a Mauser style extractor and all that kind of stuff, which requires a lot of milling, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of effort, a lot of cost. Remington decided that they were going to go a different route in order to be able to get around this, but still build something that was good. That's one of the core concepts here. So a couple of things that they would employ. First off, they would go with a rounded receiver in order to diminish the amount of milling that was required in order to be able to make the receiver to begin with, which is not the first time we've seen this in history. We would actually see this change in 1930 with the Mosin-Nagant, which would go from a hexagonal receiver on the 91 to the 9130 pattern, which would have a round receiver. Hexagonal receivers nor round receivers are more strong. One is not stronger than the other. So what was the additional milling doing at that point? Doing nothing but costing time and money. So they went to a round receiver. They also decided to go to a push feed type system, which we see in Carcano rifles, the Mosin-Nagants, and all that kind of stuff. It's not controlled feed where the cartridge case is immediately underneath the extractor as soon as the round moves up into position on the bolt face. Now, instead, the extractor does not lip onto the cartridge case up until the bolt moves all the way into battery. There's not really a difference in reliability there. You're still eventually getting that extractor lipped onto the cartridge casing, so why go with the additional milling and all that kind of stuff? This rifle would become a runaway hit with the sportsman's market, and with it being so popular in the sportsman's market, it would eventually garner military attention as well, and would be adopted by the United States Army and the Marine Corps as the M24 and M40 sniper systems, respectively. M24 went to the Army, M40 went to the Marine Corps. With its adoption by the military and popularity in the hunting realm, you would also see this rifle adopted by a lot of police snipers once we started getting police snipers in the 70s. But what has truly led to the proliferation of this rifle is that Model 700 Action, which you can buy just the Model 700 Action and use it to be able to build your own custom rifle because there's such a thriving aftermarket support for the Model 700 when it comes into stocks, drop-in chassis, all those types of things. So not only are there a bunch of people building custom Model 700 rifles utilizing that action, there are also other manufacturers that are using the Model 700 Action, most outstanding of which to me at least is Bergara, though I'm sure there are others as well. Even with this being a runaway success for Remington, there would be some issues because eventually Remington would be bought out by the Freedom Arms Group, which was not a good fit for Remington, and there would be a lot of like quality control issues and all that kind of stuff, and has led to truly the demise of an American titan that was Remington Arms. All right, guys, I think that pretty much covers the history of this particular rifle. Why don't we go ahead? Other than to note that this rifle has been produced in a variety of styles and finishes and stocks and all that kind of stuff, which we'll talk about some of those as we go through. Why don't we go ahead and talk about the features of this particular rifle? Right off the bat, we have a 24-inch sporter profile barrel, which is to say that it's very light. We can see that's a little bit wider here near the chamber, and then it tapers as we get out towards the muzzle. Our muzzle is crowned, so that there's no damage potentially to the muzzle that's going to impact accuracy. On current rifles that are were in the same price point, you would see threaded muzzles now. This rifle predates that by quite a bit, unfortunately. Now, this is a 5R rifle barrel. What's the advantage of 5R rifling? Well, so you don't have lands and grooves that are directly across from each other, which is supposed to have a positive impact on the deformation of the bullet. I really only hear Remington ever talking about the fact that they have 5R rifled barrels, but it is supposed to be a positive attribute of this barrel. All right, we have a synthetic stock here. The difference between this and an SPS is that the SPS has some like rubberizing going on inside of these same areas where we see the texturing on this stock. I kind of wonder if these didn't come off of the same production line, just one got rubber and the other just got this texturing here. We have to check this beforehand, but the barrel is not free-floated, which, you know, nowadays everyone talks about how important free-floating is, and I will say that free-floating is not unimportant, but I don't know if it's necessarily the most important thing in the world. Maybe that's a whole nother video all by itself. All right, let's talk about the scope real quick. This is a no-name 3-9 by 40 scope with a simple duplex reticle. This came with the rifle. This was rolled into the cost of the rifle along with these probably very crappy rings and the bases and stuff like that. And I've got to say that while I would not necessarily select this scope for myself, I wouldn't be walking through store shelves and be like, that one, I want that scope. This has not been a bad scope when it comes to like being able to pick up this rifle, take it to the range, and then be out hunting with it within the same week that I purchased the gun. So there's something to be said for that. At some point, I will upgrade this scope, but for the moment, I mean, it's really not been holding me back, and we'll talk about that more once we get into shooting. Let's go ahead and talk about our action. We have a push feed action, like I discussed previously. The bolt removal button is located here on the trigger guard. Press down on that, we're able to remove the bolt. As we can see here, we have a monolithic bolt with locking lugs, 2 large locking lugs right there. And our extractor set into the bolt face. Might be difficult to make out, but it's right there along with our plunger. This is a push feed system, as was previously discussed. This is a cock on close action, for those of you who are concerned about that. The receiver is set up in the 3 rings of steel, as it's referred to. So the bolt face is recessed enough in order to be able to help contain pressures. We have the counterboring of the chamber, as well as the forward receiver ring, which all contribute to being able to contain pressures for like extremely potent cartridges and stuff like that. That's where the strength of this action comes from. We also have a vent hole set right here in case you did have some sort of cartridge case failure. It would vent out of there instead of going off in your face like a pipe bomb. Our magazine is a 4+1 capacity. At first, I wasn't sure if I could like hold those cartridges down and be able to load a 5th round into here. Turns out that you can. That's important to know. Now, this being the ADL, we do not have any type of magazine floor plate here, which would be handy for not only disassembling the rifle, but also being able to quickly eject ammunition out of it. So now if I have this magazine fully loaded up, I've got to cycle the action until I get all the ammo out. So that's the difference between an ADL and a BDL in this case. The bolt handle is nicely knurled, but it's kind of thin and low profile, and I have kind of like missed it while cycling here in the past. I now understand why some people prefer to like add oversized bolt handles one way or another, so you can like cut this off and get a different bolt handle installed, or you can put like a rubber piece over top of this so that you can better grip it whenever it is that you're cycling the action. The safety is a simple lever located right here, easy to operate with the thumb for safe and fire. When the weapon is in safe, you are still able to cycle your action and empty out the ammunition. There's not a position that locks the bolt in place. That might be important to you, that might not be. To each their own on that. All right, our trigger. Our trigger is single stage. There's a teeny tiny amount of take up. It's a fairly crisp let off, but it is slightly heavy. And this trigger is adjustable. I've not gotten in there and adjusted it or anything along those lines because honestly, guys, I'm not a trigger snob. I'm not too worried about trying to get like the lightest trigger break that I possibly can out of this, because this is still like kind of a serious use rifle and I don't want it to be too light to the point of it being dangerous. See here we have a semi-pistol grip, as we would kind of expect for a rifle. I do enjoy semi-pistol grips. It gives me something to pull the rifle back into my shoulder with. We also have a slight cheek riser over on this side, which is relatively benign, I guess. I don't think it necessarily helps. I don't think it hurts anything, that's for sure. We have a rubber butt pad on the back, which is marked with a large R for Remington, in case you forget who it is that produces this. This is their Supercell butt pad. Nice and spongy. We have built-in sling swivels that I have attached this cheap Walmart padded sling. I haven't had any issues with the sling. I don't have anything negative to say about it. It's done exactly what you want a non-adjustable padded sling to do. All right, guys, that's features. How does it shoot? All right, overall, when it comes to shooting dynamics and stuff like that, first off, the recoil, even though this rifle only comes in at about like just under 7.5 pounds, the recoil with the full power rifle cartridge like the 270 is not that bad. This is like a long action and stuff like that, so it does take a little bit longer or a little bit more effort to kind of like cycle the bolt. You know, here right now, the bolt is cocked, so it cycles back and forth very easily. However, when I'm going from the cocked position, there's a lot more tension on the upturn of the bolt. So the bolt itself moving back and forth, not necessarily all that noticeable, but I think it is plenty smooth for the amount of money that I wound up paying for this. For kind of the price point and purpose of this rifle. This is meant to be a budget Remington Model 700, and I think it performs very well for it being a budget Remington Model 700. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the accuracy portion here, and I want to go ahead and get a caveat out of the way whenever it is that we're talking about accuracy. When a lot of people review sporting type rifles, they have a tendency to do only 3-shot groups, and I find the justifications for doing so lacking. A lot of people cite that, like, well, you're only going to fire 1, maybe 2 rounds out of your rifle, so why do you need more than a 3-shot group? And honestly, evaluating accuracy has absolutely nothing to do with the number of times that you intend to fire the rifle. It has everything to do to be able to get an average scoring of what the rifle is capable of doing when it comes to accuracy. And to me, that doesn't matter what the use or the barrel profile or any of those types of things matter. So on this channel, we evaluate everything with a 5-shot, all rifles with a 5-shot grouping, and this rifle is no exception. So with that being the case, I shot actually quite a few groups with this rifle to be able to get a feel for what the accuracy is going to be like with this fairly light sporter profile barrel. And it started off with this Federal 130 grain soft point load at 100 yards, where I got this 3 7/8 inch group. Now this was a cold bore group, and there's a couple of extra flyers in there. This was actually off of the target that I was trying to shoot at, so these are previous impacts that were on that backer. But I was able to, find my 5 hits that correlated to the appropriate size of the projectile. So 3 7/8 inch cold bore, not that impressive right off the bat. After that, I shot this 2 1/8 inch group, same distance, same load. Okay, we are now seeing this trend in a positive direction at this point. So at this point, I then changed ammunition, and I fired 5 rounds of the PPU 150 grain soft point, and got this 2-inch group. Again, we are trending in the proper direction. After that, the next weekend, I went back out to the range with that same Federal 130 grain soft point load that we were already talking about previously, and I shot this 4 5/8 inch cold bore group. So accuracy wise, I would say that this rifle's coming in closer to 3 inches than it is to 2. I think that is plenty accurate for a lot of the common distances that you might engage, like a whitetail and stuff like that, at least for a lot of the country. I can say that I have shot this rifle. I originally had this rifle zeroed around 150 grain 270 ammunition. I found that dropped too much whenever it was that I was shooting out towards like 200 yards. Clearly, it's not doing that bad at 100 yards. We're seeing a little bit of drop between that and what we were coming to expect with the 130 grain load, but I can tell you that drop accumulates rather rapidly. So that's when I switched over to the 130 grain load. And with that 130 grain load, I've been able to push this rifle out to 400 yards and ring 8-inch steel no problem. From 2 to 400 yards. So I am very happy with the capabilities of this rifle, even with this not very nice scope. I found that the shooting trajectory was pretty flat with the 130 grain load. It was very easy for me to be able to stack consistent hits out to distance. Now, I did have one malfunction with the rifle. However, it was kind of a shooter-induced type situation. So I had this set up on my shooting bag, and as I was cycling the action, the rounds were ejecting into my shooting bag and falling back into the chamber, causing me to get into a double feed type situation. So that's not any fault of the rifle for sure. When it comes to the rifle itself, it has been very reliable, as you would expect for a bolt-action rifle in general. All right, guys, that's shooting. What are my recommendations when it comes to this particular rifle? Would I recommend this for duty type use? Absolutely not. for a variety of reasons. If you're talking about like a duty sniper or something along those lines, get an actual sniper rifle. Or update this rifle to be a sniper rifle. Ditch this barrel, ditch the stock, ditch the scope, all these things. The action itself is more than capable of being able to perform in that manner. How it is presently accessorized is not. So no, I would not recommend this for duty type use, not at all. There are plenty of better duty type options available out there on the market in order to be able to actually correlate to that use. Okay, well, what about as a home defense, self-defense type option? Well, we're talking about home defense. You'd have to live in a pretty rural area, and it's kind of difficult to be able to justify home defense with a scoped rifle. Like, yes, you could shoot at somebody at fairly close range with this thing set down on 3 power and be able to defend yourself adequately. But if you're actually like cranking this up to 9 power and taking longer shots, it's going to be difficult to explain to somebody why you had to take that person's life in a self-defense type situation. If you lived in a more populated, urban or suburban area or something along those lines, the 270 cartridge is pretty potent, and you're definitely going to run into some issues potentially with overpenetration and stuff like that. So I would not recommend this for home defense. For self-defense, like as a truck gun or something along those lines, not my first choice. I would prefer for a truck gun, for my uses, for defensive type uses, I prefer something much shorter that's going to be easier to be able to handle inside of a cab. That's just me. But that is what I have found to make the most amount of sense for a truck gun for defensive purposes. What about for like the armed concerned citizen? Is this what you're going to be fighting the Russians falling out of the sky? With this particular rifle, is this going to be your go-to option? For the same thing, the armed citizen and then like the law enforcement military requirements are very similar, and this rifle does not match up for that. This is not the rifle that you should be envisioning when you're making your statement about there being a rifle behind every blade of grass. Could it do it? Sure. Would I preference it for it? Absolutely not. Okay, well, what about as a competition rifle? Again, no. If you're talking about getting in the PRS or something along those lines, sure, if you want to come out and, this is all you have and you still want to compete and stuff like that, you could take this rifle out there. You just need to understand that you're not going to be competitive. This is not going to be a successful execution in your favor. So kind of like temper your expectations with the realities of what equipment it is that you're using. You can go ahead and take this out there to like whet your appetite, but realize that you're going to get spanked. And hopefully you come away with a better understanding of what it is that you need out of a precision type rifle. If it comes to like 2-gun or 3-gun or something along those lines, absolutely not. The cost of the ammunition alone is probably going to break you of that idea, because 270 Winchester is not cheap. I'm seeing it at roughly $30 a box right now. All right, well, what about as a hunting rifle? Absolutely. This is a fantastic option, especially since this comes chambered in a variety of cartridges to go after whatever type of game it is that you want to. 7mm mag, 30-06, 223, whatever cartridge you need to pair to the game that you want to go after, this rifle is probably produced in it. So I would 100% recommend this for hunting type purposes, as long as you're tailoring the cartridge and the load to what it is that you're trying to achieve. Okay. What about as a woods gun? Now, if you were to throw this across the back of your 4-wheeler or maybe like your farm truck or something along those lines, and you had this on hand for taking on like predators of either the 2 or 4-legged variety, this wouldn't be the worst option. This would be a good field rifle of one type or another. So, something to consider there. All right, guys, so those are my recommendations. What are your uses when it comes to this rifle, Murph? Well, I'm a big fan of this as a hunting rifle. I've actually taken several white-tailed deer with this rifle and would be more than willing to do so again. Especially since now where I'm living is a little bit more mountainous, this being a fairly lightweight rifle will be very successful for that, though I would like to pick up a newer, lighter weight rifle because, my hunting considerations have changed. That's a perfect excuse to be able to get a new gun, right? All right, guys, what about competitive options out on the market? Well, if I were looking at competitive options, I might look at in a similar price point, because originally, guys, I bought this rifle when Gander Mountain was going out of business in a bunch of different locations. So I picked this up for like under $400. If I were looking for something around that price point right now, I would look very hard at the Ruger American. There's a lot of really great options when it comes to the Ruger American. You can get it in a variety of stocks and chamberings and all that kind of stuff. It is definitely what the 700 ADL used to be, which now the ADL, as I understand it, is superseded by the SPS. If I were to go and pay a little bit more money, depending on like where it is that I'm shopping and stuff like that, I would look at a Bergara Hunter, the B14 Hunter. Fantastic rifle. I'm a really big fan of Bergaras from what I've been able to see out of them so far, and I would definitely recommend them to kind of fit in the same class and category and all that kind of stuff. I think the MSRP on both of these rifles is relatively similar, be it the SPS or the ADL versus the B14, and you'll be able to find them out in the wild for much less. Now, one other thing I do want to call attention to, at one point there was a recall on triggers for the Remington Model 700. It was the X mark triggers, so there was an issue with them kind of like spontaneously going off and stuff like that, so that's something to keep in mind. But I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on this particular subject. I hope you guys found this interesting, and that's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.